Nothing. No distress calls. Traffic was thin at this hour, and Kallstrom was able to weave in and around the scattered taxis and charge-and-ride limousines. In the FBI's New York office, his fast driving habits were notorious. Everyone conceded he was good at the wheel. Everyone knew he'd scored high in the FBI's tactical driving courses, and that he was a race car and motorcycle enthusiast. But the New York agents also did anything they could to avoid riding with him. The work was dangerous enough as it was. No distress calls? Kallstrom turned the air conditioning up. With the back of his hand, he brushed the sweat from his brow and ran his fingers through his thick black hair. Commercial jets don't just fall out of the sky by accident. Kallstrom thought there was a good chance it was a bomb. Ever since the World Trade Center bombing 3 years before, he'd dreaded the next attack. You could beef up security, wiretap even more suspected terrorists, but Kallstrom knew the real lesson of the World Trade Center. You couldn't cover every possibility. You could never know what was going to happen next. One thing was sure. If a 747 and its passengers had just been downed by sabotage, the world had changed. No plane had ever been downed by terrorists in the United States before. Hurtling down the FDR Drive, Kallstrom punched an unlisted Virginia home number into the secure phone set on the floor beside his seat. "Louis, we have a 747 down in the water just off the south shore of Long Island," he said tersely in his lingering Boston accent. "Any survivors, Jimmy?" Louis Free, the FBI's director, was more than a colleague on a first-name basis with his New York bureau chief. Years ago, Free had worked for Kallstrom as a field agent. When he'd left the FBI to become a federal prosecutor, he and Kallstrom continued to work together to convict mafia bosses. "I've got agents headed over to the Coast Guard station in East Moriches. They're sending boats out from there. So far, we just don't know." "Anything you need, you got it. You know that, right?" "Right." Within minutes, the news had been passed up the line. From Free to Attorney General Janet Reno, from Reno to White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta, from Panetta to President Clinton. Kallstrom's next call was to his number 2 man, Tom Pickard, whom he instructed to call John O'Neill, head of the FBI's counterterrorism unit in Washington. O'Neill then called the President's Special Assistant on Terrorism, Richard Clark, and that was how it worked. From Kallstrom's car phone, the White House was now alerted and on the case. Kallstrom's beeper went off again. He pulled it up from his belt and squinted at the number. It was his own. When his wife answered, he started to explain, but she cut him off. "I know," she said. "Call Charlie." "Charlie Christopher?" "He thinks Janet was working that flight." Charlie Christopher was a fellow FBI agent and Kallstrom's close friend. He had been an usher at Charlie's wedding when he married Janet Wolfe 13 years ago. Janet had been a TWA flight attendant for 25 years. She adored her work, so much that she had put off marriage to Charlie for 10 years, until he agreed she could keep flying after they had children. As an attendant, she was meticulous, but also exuberant and fun. And not above coming back to the steward's station to whisper, "Wait till you see that hairdo in 32F. The Kallstroms, like all her friends, had been awed by her knowledge of restaurants and shops in cities around the world. She would walk into a tucked-away jewelry store in Vienna, and the proprietor would beam, "Ah, Janet, I've got a new pair of earrings I know you'll love." Kallstrom clutched the steering wheel tighter as he heard Charlie pick up. "Hey, Charlie, it's Jim." Charlie was frantic. "She's on that plane, Jim. She wasn't supposed to be, but she was." Usually Janet worked Fridays, Flight 800, returning from Paris on Sunday night. This week she'd changed shifts with a coworker, so she could be back in time to help 12-year-old Charles pack and see him off to Boy Scout camp. "What can you tell me?" Charlie pleaded. Kallstrom swallowed hard. "The Coast Guard is out there in full force. County police. It's a full-scale rescue effort, Charlie," he said. "That's all I know."